Welcome back to another episode of The Laws That Matter. I'm Carissa Kranz. Thank you for joining us. And today we have breaking news. And I'm really proud to report this news. As the founder and CEO of BeVeg, we are now the first internationally accredited vegan standard in the world, which revolutionizes vegan claims. And with me today, I have Dave McGee, Chief Compliance Officer of BeVeg, who is educated in food science and technology and is an expert BRC and GFSI auditor and a vegan consultant. So without further ado, Dave, thank you so much for joining me today on The Laws That Matter. And I'm so great to have this reported on Jane Unchained News Network, of all places, a vegan network with over 1 million followers. So, Dave, let's talk about the BeVeg standard. Why is BeVeg special? Why is it different? Why is it important to have vegan certified claims? And why should that be taken seriously? It's a compound question.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's an important question. I think there's a lot of certification people out there that are making lots of claims for vegan trademarks in the UK and in Europe. But I think with BeVeg, what makes it so different is the fact that the standard itself is it's all being designed for what they call GFSI, which is a global food safety standard. So all the clauses, all the content is basically designed for auditors that are working inside the food industry for food safety. Nothing would surprise them. And so in terms of administering the standard globally, all the auditors and people that would be involved, they would actually have a rapport with the style of the questions. But the big difference is that the clauses and everything are very, very focused and designed on the what basically is important to vegan manufacturer, which is quite unique, and it's quite multi-dimensional. Really, we have other vegan companies that are looking at all the ingredients, and they're very good at that. All the hidden ingredients, the compound ingredients, the processing aids, and that's how manufacturers get their license. Basically, they send in their ingredients, they ask lots of questions, and they ask some basic questions about cross-contamination in the food factory, and then they get their license for a year, and then that's it. So they get it on the labeling and everything's great. So with BeVeg, I've basically used my experience, so maybe 20 years BRC auditing experience, and I've looked at the sort of questions you need to ask that will protect a vegan brand trademark. And I've looked at obviously BRC and all these other GFSI food safety standards. And there are quite a lot of weaknesses in the way you audit those food safety standards. So what we've done at BeVeg is we've basically designed a standard that absolutely captures everything that you can imagine to protect, to prevent cross-contamination from the product, to look at the ingredients, to look at the supply chain. But we look at a lot more things than other people would do. It's been designed in a very special way. This is based on years and years of experience. So yes, we've got a very good vegan technical standard that asks all the right questions. But the key point is we train these auditors, and those auditors have to understand the clauses, but they also need to know when they arrive in a food factory what the challenges are, what the areas of points of attention are that would cause cross-contamination. So they have to have a very special awareness in the factory. So they're not just looking at ingredients, they're not looking at paperwork, they're looking in the factory, seeing where those all that cross-contamination can occur, such as product changeover, mistaken labels, that sort of thing. And they're also looking at the organizational structure of the company. So a very good example would be supervisors, shop floor supervisors. If they're not trained and they don't take the vegan importance onto the shop floor, you'll get a food safety culture that won't recognize the importance of preventing cross-contamination. So we're talking about factories that are producing animal products as well as vegan in the same manufacturing site. But with this approach where you're training the auditors properly, they're interviewing the staff on the shop floor, they're making sure the supervisors are trained, they're making sure that the systems are ongoing. So if there's any changes, their systems need to identify it and report it to BeVeg. We're looking at that food manufacturer's ability to approve their raw material suppliers on the supply chain. So they're asking their suppliers questions that will prevent cross-contamination. And as I said, if there's any changes over the year, we won't give them that certification unless they have systems in place where they can identify changes ongoing throughout the year that will prevent change that would cause vegan cross-contamination. So it's been really, really designed very, very carefully and based on actual practical industrial experience.
And I think that that's so important. So, I'm the lawyer, I'm the legal expert. I can talk, for hours about all the deficiencies in the law and consumer protection laws, which is a global deficiency and a global problem, the lack of a vegan definition, how the law protects trade secrets to the detriment of consumer transparency, how there's no legal liability for vegans to protect vegan claims. But I don't have the experience in the factory like you. 20 years, doing audits for some of the highest standards in the world. So I want to know, and I'm sure those that are listening would like to know, not only why are vegan claims important, because if you're a consumer listening and you care about veganism, the reality is if you see a vegan claim on a product, you cannot trust it. It's used loosely. And the question is vegan by what standard? It's not defined. So you cannot trust it. And there shouldn't be any legal way to make a vegan claim unless it's certified, because otherwise it's pretty much plant-based, which means it's mostly vegan, and vegan friendly means we think we're vegan, but we're not sure. So having a vegan claim should be taken seriously, like kosher, like gluten-free, like other good food safety initiative standards. But I think that what the consumer would like to know is, based on your experience, Dave, of doing so many audits over the last 20 years, what is it that you see in the factories and in the manufacturing facilities happening that make you feel that this is so important for vegans? Because I know you did say it, there are shared facilities. So those that are getting vegan products, and they may be a vegan production line being run, it's on a shared production line. But what is it that you've really seen firsthand that makes this so important?
Well, I think those sorts of controls that we're talking about to make vegan be taken seriously, we've already got that in terms of systems, controls, training, awareness and culture when it comes to allergens. But I don't think that's being recognised for the vegan side of things. If you think about it, an allergen is something that if we're making a claim that it shouldn't be there, if it is there and it gets into the product by mistake, we've then got a very serious food safety issue. Why not apply that for vegans? So if we've got milk powder that's stored next to a non-milk powder equivalent, how are those people that are handling all those ingredients going to know the difference unless they're trained and supervised? How are they supposed to sort of work to any standard if we're not asking them? So I go into a food factory. Yes, please.
And I don't want to disrupt you, but I like having the conversation here. And when you say things, it makes me think of things. When you say training, it's so important, because the reality is a lot of people still don't understand what vegan is. They don't understand that vegan and vegetarian is different. And those that are listening should understand with you, you're arguably and potentially the only vegan food safety consultant in the UK and possibly the world. So you are there firsthand going into these facilities, and you're seeing the lack of competence in education. So so this is an education program for these shared facilities that are having animal products and non-animal products in the same packaging and washrooms and production lines, to be able to train them to just be aware of what vegan is, to be respectful to any dignity of a standard.
That's right. And I mean, also you can't escape the vegan claims do have a food safety aspect to them as well. For example, if you buy a product and it has a very reputable vegan trademark, even if that label is legally correct, for example, they put what they call alibi labeling. They say this is a factory that handles milk, fish, crustaceans, mollusks, whatever. Even if you make that declaration, a person who looks at that trusted vegan trademark is going to make a judgment. They're not going to look at that alibi labeling because they don't expect there to be any animal derivatives. So if they've not taken training, cross-contamination seriously, and it is handled in the same production site, the same equipment or the same lines or the same storage areas, and they're not taking it seriously, suddenly a person who's allergenic to milk or fish, they're going to buy that product, and they've been misled, and that's not in the theme of the legal requirements that all the food labeling requirements need. So we've got a unexpected allergenic issue. with these things. And it only takes one product to be tested, and there's fish oils in that product. And do we have a product recall? Do we have a company's brand integrity being damaged? You know.
Mm-hmm.
So this is quite important. So it's not just the fact that it's a vegan claim; it's a food safety allergen claim. Mm-hmm. So, and if they don't take this situation more seriously, then we do have a food safety issue, and that's frustrating.
Yeah,
and that's what BVeg is trying to tackle. Something that nobody else is doing and taking seriously.
And that's so true. Gosh, you said so many things that have layers there that need to be addressed that people don't realize. As you know, the CEO of BVeg, who's been doing vegan certifications with the company now for a while, I've seen a lot of things go down with products that have applied and, for example, failed our process and then are still marketing vegan on their product packaging on grocery store shelves because the law does not protect the vegan claim. It doesn't recognize the vegan word. So long as that word can be loosely held, no one's taking it seriously. Manufacturing facilities aren't taking it seriously. Brand owners care about sales and increased sales, especially those that are wanting to jump on the plant-based marketing bandwagon who aren't exactly even vegan as a chosen lifestyle and as an identity. So right now, there's a lot of consumer protection law deficiencies that allow for fraudulent and misleading and deceptive advertising of vegan claims when in reality, it's not vegan at all. And I know that the laws as they are penned today, especially in the United States, they allow for example, the FDA allows you to round down to 0 if there is less than 0.5 grams of an ingredient per serving. So that means that if there's 0.4 grams of sugar per serving, you can round down and say sugar-free, and you don't even have to disclose sugar in your product packaging or ingredients. Well, that also proposes a problem for vegan claims as well if you're not looking into enforcing and asking and requiring legally companies to prove up their vegan claims, because that sugar could have bone char in it or natural charcoal, which is a form of bone char, which then allows them to have a loosely made vegan claim, when in reality, to a vegan standard, that's not vegan at all.
No.
So there's...
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think what's interesting about BVeg, if you look at what I've been talking about, we've been talking about vegan. So obviously I'm talking about food manufacturers. So we're talking about plant-based and allergen issues and everything else that you've said. But with BVeg, we're ISO 17065, we're ISO 17067, completely and utterly no. We've created a vegan safety standard that's nobody else has done, where we've managed to get all these GFSI standards and put all the relevant questions into one practical approach. We're looking at the way an auditor can challenge the food factory, knowing where all those potential cross-contaminations are happening. So we're then safe about the factory physically, but we're asking much more than that. We're asking about the supply chain. So you've just mentioned fraudulent activity. If you're making a claim and you want to make more money, usually claims cost much more money in technical resources, etc. So the temptation, especially when we have COVID and all these economic problems, people will substitute deliberately an ingredient that is more expensive than is declared. How would you control that? And how would you know if there's any changes, emerging risks? So if it was a food safety incident, the BRC and all these GFSI standards, they know about that. They use a thing called VASUP or horizon scanning. Nobody's doing that for vegan products. Nobody's doing that for plant-based. And BVeg is quite a sophisticated approach. Because it's complex, because it's very difficult, the standard has to be written in a style that other auditors around the world who are dealing with GFSI standards, they need to understand that. So the language, the style is all there in the BVeg approach. So we're looking at the style, the content, the supply chain, the factory, the ingredients, what happens when things change, what happens when you buy your product from China, India, or America, where there's different economic changes. So it's a very sophisticated approach, basically, but we've done it in a very systematic way, where when we do train auditors working for BVeg, it won't be a quantum leap. it will be something they'll be familiar with. The only difference is we're focusing all their experience into what matters for vegan. And then the last thing I'll say is what makes it very interesting is BeVeg isn't just about plant-based. It's about cosmetics, it's about fashion, it's about restaurants, and we can apply those same principles to all these different areas. And it talks about sustainability, organic, GMO, all these things that are associated that the consumer would expect. So if we have a BeVeg vegan symbol on that product, you know, they don't want palm oil, they don't want coconuts where some monkeys are being running up trees and they're being killed and exploited. They want us to be sophisticated. They want us to understand animal cruelty, no animal cross-contamination. They expect all these things, and that's what BeVeg is doing. It's got all those encompasses one thing, and it will grow and it will develop. And because it's to recognise standards, the idea of making veganism a legal definition, it suddenly becomes much more practical because we're approaching it in a very practical, industrial, commercial way.
Mm-hmm.
That was a lot.
No, but it's so good. It's loaded, but it's so good to peel away the layers, because the reality is there's so much here, and so many people don't realize it. And those that are even vegans and follow the vegan movement and are out there protesting, doing direct action, they don't realize how duped they are when it comes to the products they're buying, and how important it is that they not only take to the streets for their cause, but that they also take their dollar to vote for products that support their cause. Because if they are buying a product that is vegan certified by BeVeg, then they know that they are supporting an entire supply chain of vegan conscious companies when it comes to that product and that ingredient. Whereas if they are buying something plant-based, that part of their dollar spent could be going to support a company and a source ingredient that is not conscious and that is not practicing ethical vegan practices in their production. So it's so important that we do this and we implement it, and we have a singular way of implementation that is uniform, that people will take seriously with checks and balances, because right now manufacturing facilities treat veganism as a joke. They take kosher seriously, they take gluten-free seriously, they take food safety claims seriously, but they do not take vegan claims seriously. They just want the marketing benefit. So it is now more than ever. I mean, I'm a lifelong vegan, born and raised, and people don't understand cross-contamination. They don't get it. Auditors will get it, but they will need to be trained on it still, because they don't understand vegan, for example. They understand cross-contamination. And in a time of COVID and a pandemic, whether you're vegan or not, you should want the clean claim, the transparency. And the statistics say that 75% more people will pay extra for a clean label that they can trust, whether they're vegan or not. Doesn't matter if they're vegan. They want the label that they can trust, because nobody wants to be lied to. And that's why there's consumer protection laws in place. We're not supposed to be lied to, but right now there's loopholes in the law that allow us to be lied to, where BeVeg closes the gap. BeVeg will close the gap. So in your 20 years experience of auditing manufacturing facilities for global food safety standards, what is it that you see is most at risk for vegan claims?
Well, you know, you can have a very poor company, you can have a very great company with all the accreditations, certifications, and quite a few companies I've been to, they're very good at paperwork, they're very good at checklists. And I've been to America, I've been to Canada, I've been all around Europe, I've been to Turkey, many places. And the thing that strikes me the most is a thing called food safety culture. And it's in what we call the BRC standard, which is what they call a GFSI food safety standard. It's not taken seriously in the BRC. It's one tiny clause out of 400 clauses. I go to a factory and I can work out that food safety culture within minutes of arrival. And it's people's attitudes to food safety. And if you're going to have a vegan claim, that requires special attention It requires training and supervision. And if you don't have that food safety culture, which starts from the top, from the MD, from the company owners, people aren't going to be bothered. They're going to have their procedures, their policies, they'll fill out the paperwork, but they'll get that bag of gelatine, or they'll get that bag of milk powder in the storage area. They'll have some temp who's not being trained because he's cheap, and he's going to open that bag and he's going to return it unlabeled, unprotected. The housekeeping won't be as good as what it needs to be, and it's going to spill, cross-contaminate into that product, that ingredient, that white powder that's supposed to be used in our vegan claim. Nobody will know about it, and it will go through and fine. So it requires somebody really special, the only vegan auditor, a vegan attorney who's looking at the legal side, all these gaps. Absolutely, vegan is not taken seriously. So how do you approach that? So you create a ISO recognized global standard. You approach it better than GFSI, where you're challenging those companies, and the auditors aren't trained in clauses, tick lists, filling out the paperwork. They have to have a skill based on experience where they can pick up that food safety culture. Are the supervisors aware of cross-contamination? How do you interview them? Where do you look? What is the process flow, the layout? That requires a lot of experience and judgment. And your cross-contamination comes from not paperwork, not even training. It comes from food safety culture. So in the BVEG standard, we look at job descriptions, we look at training, we look at all these things, the people side of the shop floor. We don't focus on all the heavy going policies. Everything we do, it's focused on the shop floor. And if there are procedures and systems that requires the supply chain, then we look at the training and the management commitment there. So it's very multidimensional, it's very practical, and it's trying to overcome all those weaknesses that you now have in these global certification programs. And I can promise you now, there's a British vegan certification, there's a Dutch, there's a new one coming out in America, and they've got all the clauses, but they do not approach it. They do not take food safety culture and training. They do not emphasize the points of attention that can cause cross-contamination, where we can have these food safety issues. Nobody has that intimate, caring approach to preventing and protecting the brand, protecting that BVEG so that you can actually trust it. Nobody's doing that. And I can absolutely say, even all these competitors, all these people that are saying this, it's a fantastic new cause, they will not be approaching it with this level of intimacy and care and due diligence that we're approaching it with. Because we're not just a scheme. We really care about this being done properly, and we want the vegan claim to be taken legally seriously. And you can't do that unless you're working with the biggies, the ISOs, the GFSIs, and you're doing it globally in a systematic way. And this is a very unique project. It's never happened before. And that's why I'm so excited and proud to be working with it. And I mean that.
Yeah, no. And Dave, like, I have goosebumps because me too, right? I'm a lawyer. I've been spending, a decade more practicing law, doing the types of laws that I was taught to do, went to law school to do. I'm licensed in 3 different states. I have offices in 3 different locations. I've had a big law firm. I've worked at one of the top 5 global law firms in the world. I was a prosecutor, and when I realized the deficiencies with vegan in the law as a lifelong vegan, I had that aha moment that how could this be? How could we be so deficient? And that's when I got excited about the law. Being a lawyer, it can be very draining at times, especially litigation, because you're taking on causes and problems that are usually other people's problems. But when you have the opportunity to take on a cause that you feel called to do and you're excited about, and you feel like you're making a difference in this world, and it's truly cases of first impression, you have a chance to define the laws. You have a chance to be a leader with the law and allow and teach others to follow you. So whether it's, training in the manufacturing facility or educating those that are just the consumer buying these products and are being completely lied to and duped, or it's even just penning new laws within the law. I remember when Ruth Bader Ginsburg was doing the women's rights movement, and she was talking to the other Supreme Court justices on the bench about equal protection under the law as a female, that she said, I felt like I was talking to a bunch of kindergartners. Because she didn't want to offend the male Supreme Court justices. And she said, I had to talk to them in a way that wasn't going to offend them, but that was going to make them want to join me. And that is a really touchy line, but it is so important because this is a movement that everyone should want to join. This is not a vegan movement. This is a movement of honesty. This is a movement of transparency. This is a movement of integrity. This is a movement against cross-contamination. This is a movement about cleanliness. This is a movement about labeling laws. This is a movement about being protected as a consumer when you buy a product and you are label and ingredient conscious, that you are buying what you expect to be buying. And most people aren't. And most people don't realize that they're not. Because these claims aren't taken seriously.
Yeah, definitely. I think what excites me about this, as I said, you're approaching it globally. You're doing it in the proper way. All those certification bodies, all the global organizations, it's all established. We've tapped into that and we've identified what matters to the vegan cause. So it's all recognized globally. And for me, I would really, really want people like Quorn, Alpro, all the biggies to look at this scheme because it is unique. Two individuals that have just met that are very unique, who are very determined, and they should be looking at brand protection. And they should be thinking, yeah, you know what? There are laws now beginning to be developed. We do need to make this claim and take it seriously. We will get prosecuted because you know, I've looked at many product recalls with vegan trademarks on them for allergen risks. And, you know, did the company get sued? How long will it take before the vegan trademark will get sued? You know, you have to take it serious.
There's a lot of layers there with vegan trademarks. So I want to point out one thing that I think is important that people don't understand and don't know is that people say, well, there's other vegan trademarks out there. I don't understand what, and those are registered trademarks. So what do you mean that you're different? Okay, so this is a great question and probably one mostly only a lawyer would really understand or someone that's in food safety. But the reality is that anyone can come up with a trademark and go register a trademark. And if you have money, you can register that trademark in as many jurisdictions as you want. Period. End of story. It's quite easy to do. Anyone can do it. And that's why we see these vegan certification marks popping up all over the world. And like you said, in Australia, in New Zealand, and you know, Latin America, there's a bunch out there now. But one thing with BeVeg is we are a global trademark registered in 6 continents, all but Antarctica. And one day maybe I'll plant a little vegan flag there. But we are everywhere. But we're not just a global trademark. We are accredited by ISO. And ISO is the International Standardization Organization. So they are in the business of standardizing claims and programs. And ISO 17065 is for product certification. So BeVeg is the first standard in the world to have an accredited scheme for vegan certification that is specialized for vegan product certification. And then BeVeg is accredited 17067. And that means we are an accredited conformity assessment program, which has a uniform plan to train other auditors, certification bodies to follow the standard and to apply it practically in uniformity across the board globally. So that means we are defining vegan in a way that people can find tangible. They can relate to it. They can find something and say, you know what? We know that this certification body and this standard owner has defined vegan. While the law might still not require the claims because legislation needs to be penned and case law needs to happen to protect our claims, and laws happen by, you know, a couple different ways. It happens by penning legislation, or it happens by bringing litigation, which then forces new laws to come into place. And then you have different holdings. You might have a holding in one state that is directive towards another state, and then usually there are appeals, and then decisions travel up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and then eventually it becomes the law of the land. But these things take time. And while laws get developed and penned and litigation happens, because there is a lot more vegan litigation happening right now, but right now as vegans, it's not considered a protected constitutional class in any jurisdiction, even though it's a belief system that we practice religiously, and even though religion is protected under the Constitution, and even though there's supposed to be a separation of church and state by the Constitution, and even though the government has no right to tell us what religion is, and even though in the United States the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, has recognized and defined veganism or religion to be a belief system that is strongly held, which is one step forwards towards penning it into the Equal Protection Clause of the Civil Rights Act. But no country's there yet. There's case law coming down in Europe and the US that is recognizing vegan claims as possibly constitutionally protected against discrimination, but we still have a long way to go. So in the meantime, to have a standard that you can trust, who's paving the way forward for the law, who is showing the world what the law needs to do and will do. This is what organic was 10 years ago. We have gluten-free laws, we have allergen laws. The next, movement is vegan laws. I mean, there's no way around it. It's going to happen. There's 78 million vegans in the world now. I think in 2005 it was 2 million.
Yeah.
And that's tremendous growth.
Yeah, and I think even flexitarians, which is another big contributing factor, they're going to want to trust that vegan claim just as much as a vegan. That if somebody's worried about allergens, they're going to be just as important. Even if they eat meat, even if they're flexitarian, they're still going to trust that vegan trademark is that there's not going to be any derivatives of meat and animal products in there. So I think if you've got this brand protection, if you've got this trust for the consumer, I'm just hoping that the Tesco's, the Walmarts, they're going to look at this and think, you know what, veganism's becoming global. We want to make money out of this. We're going to do private label, or some people call it white labels. It's where they get a lot of profit, the retailers, the major multiples. And even if they don't care about the vegan cause, if they see this VVEG scheme, it's GFSI, it's ISO, it's global, it's got two guys with this incredible experience in the food industry where they can actually protect their brand, that's another dimension to this. So it's not just the consumer, your Walmarts, your Corns, your Alpros, your top people, they will not get a vegan scheme with this level of integrity. And it is a very complicated project. It is quite amazing, but it's not impossible because we've already tapped into those schemes, those GFSI schemes that have been around for 20 years.
And I want to just say, retail chains of all people should take this seriously because they have deep pockets, and they're the ones that can get sued for vegan claims that are not legitimate. So while they are doing private labeling right now, and some of those private labels do say vegan on it, they really should be careful and watch out, because that is like saying kosher without being kosher certified.
Yeah,
and if you say you're there are kosher markets out there that exist, right? And every product that exists in a kosher market has to be certified to make that claim. And if they make a false and misleading claim, religion in the Constitution protects them to have a fair lawsuit for being offended and for being disrespected and for being lied to. Veganism is different right now, but that is going to soon change. So in veganism right now, you have all these vegan markets, you have these vegan marketplaces on the internet, and there's a bunch of vegan labeled products there that have been through zero inspection, zero certification. They're self-claimed vegan. It means nothing. You can't touch it. And grocery stores of all people are aware of product recalls and should be very careful that their private labels have the proper claims behind it. I know that, for example, Albertsons, which is, one of the top main grocery chains connected with Safeway as well, their own brand of organics, it's called OWN, must be USDA certified in order to be considered OWN. But so they have OWN products that are right now vegan too, supposedly, but their suppliers have not gone through any audit. Zero
that doesn't
audit.
Surprise me.
And not only that, because they don't want to go through an audit. Suppliers don't want to be audited. They don't want to deal with it. But that's why we need laws in place to make them. And that's why we need consumers educated to demand them, because nobody wants to be lied to. And I love what you said earlier. It's a vegan safety standard too, because vegan safety is food safety, and cross-contamination is cross-contamination, period, end of story, whether it's of animal origin or something else. So to know that something is vegan safe, you know that it hasn't been exposed to the spillover and cross-contamination that it could be if it wasn't audited. And in a time of COVID, when a disease was and a pandemic was arguably born out of a wet market in China, which is another term for a local slaughterhouse, because of spillover, and the CDC is saying that 3 out of 4 new viruses, emerging viruses, are of zoonotic origin. Everyone should be concerned about this issue. Everyone should care about vegan safety.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the benefits of this approach is it's got so many benefits, and I think the way we've approached this with the ISO approach, if any what they call GFSI, I keep going on about GFSI, but they're the Global Food Safety Initiative. Without their approval, you're not recognised globally. They don't treat you seriously. So your BRCs, your SQFs, all these food safety standards, they have to be what they call GFSI approved. So it's globally recognised to a standard. And you know what? This standard for BVeg, if GFSI knew about it, we would get GFSI. No problem. We've got the ISO, we've got everything. And it's looked at things in more detail, with more skill and more integrity than even the GFSI would have considered. They're two-dimensional. These are the standards. These are the questions. We're looking at it in 4 different ways. We're looking at with all the ethical companies, all associated with sustainability, rainforest, palm oil. These are very natural associations which can be put into the standard in a real logical way. So I think if Walmart were listening to this conversation now, it wouldn't faze me. It would not worry me, because you cannot have done enough, in terms of integrity, in terms of confidence and trust. So, I really want this scheme. I want the Walmarts, the Asdas, the Tesco's, the Sainsbury's, all these top people, they should know about it, and they should realize that they're going to make a lot of money out of this vegan market. But boy, oh boy, when it starts to get more serious, when it starts to get more legislated and they do private label, they're not going to put vegan on that label unless they can trust it. And this is what we've done. We've created that foundation. It's global. This isn't just about America. It isn't about the UK, because you're American, I'm British. It's a global challenge, and it's something we've really thought about strategically and carefully. And I really want the major retailers to take this seriously, what we're doing, because it's completely unique, and it's been done with integrity, commercially, ethically, every dimension you can think of. We want to be taken seriously. That means commercial. It means it's got to be a scheme that makes money. We live in a capitalist world, and that's what we've done with all the ethics associated with it. And it's something that we should be very proud of, frankly.
But that's also a very good point about being able to be commercially viable at the same time. So is it practical, from your perspective as being a food safety expert and, really into the technicalities of what goes into audits and veganism, to have a standard of the utmost integrity that can also be practical and commercially viable?
Yeah, that's a very good question. What makes it practical is we've stolen standardized questions from other recognized food safety standards. We've not cut and pasted. It's not like that. But all the training, all the style of the audit approach is something that food auditors around the world will be already familiar with. The only difference is they're focusing their trained minds into the idea of veganism. You know, these auditors will do gluten-free, they'll do meat technology, they'll do all sorts of different standards, applying the same sorts of principles. It hasn't been done for the vegan side of things. That's what we've done. But we've done something far more than what an auditor would expect. We're training those auditors to know how to challenge the factory and the supply chain so that they will go away and say, you know what, I feel really confident about this vegan claim because we've looked at it so many different ways. We've looked at the food safety culture, the training, supervision, horizon scanning, all these modern concepts. It isn't just a paperwork exercise, which can get very poor companies very good grades because they're very good at paperwork.
Yeah.
You know, all those tricks, we've thought about that.
What is, for those listening and don't know, the Horizon Scan?
Yeah, sure. It comes from America, surprisingly. And what it is, you look at the world's, you get lots of different recognized sources around the world from organizations, scientific organizations, and they very quickly detect and react to changes in the world. So, for example, if there was a big, massive food scare for flour, wheat flour in China, if you have wheat flour from China, they will send out bulletins and communications to tell you, you know what, you might need to put some extra checks into your intake checks. When you get a delivery of wheat, you know, is the supply, is it actually wheat? Is it being contaminated with this food scare? How are you going to mitigate it? How are you going to control it? So you'd send a questionnaire to the suppliers, you would test the product for 3 months using what they call an accredited test laboratory, and you'd be checking for those food scare issues. You've detected that problem in China or whatever country, and you've reacted to it, and you've still controlled it. So your claims and your food safety is still basically being maintained. It's called horizon scanning, where you can detect and react to any emerging global risks. It's to do with fraud. Basically, people deliberately adulterating, substituting products so they can make more profit, or it's where they've had some sort of political upheavals and people are deliberately contaminating their product, you know, and people aren't aware of it. So it's food defense. It's detecting, reacting, emerging risks that can affect food defense. And that is part of BVEG. This is what I mean. It's got to be taken seriously, this BVEG. It's a GFSI standard and more. And nobody's doing this.
It also really needs to be taken seriously in terms of the word vegan, because those that have allergies often rely on the word vegan to stay away from, if they're lactose intolerant or they have some other allergy, because many of the allergens out there that exist, like shellfish, are of animal origin. So it's just going to take one wrong vegan claim that someone with an allergy relies on, that then goes into anaphylactic shock and dies, that a big lawsuit gets brought because a big retailer mislabeled their product vegan and now they have an expensive recall. So, you know, in the scheme of things, it seems to me that it's a no-brainer that if people want to make the claim, they should make it with integrity. They don't have to make the claim. It's a voluntary claim to make, but they should be forbidden from making the claim if it's not going to go through the proper audits and inspections and research, with the offering up of information that would ensure that the consumer is protected in the end.
Yeah. And I think years ago, if I'd mentioned the word vegan, you know, there's a lot of connotations and negativity. You're from Star Trek Series 2, Planet Zarg. And I think it's becoming much more normal. I still audit factories. I'm still active. And I work with lots of different companies. And, you know, when you tell them you're vegan, they're not surprised anymore. It's just, oh, he's a vegan, big deal. And there's flexitarians. These are people that eat meat. But, you know, they still need something they can trust. And I think when all this veganism and plant-based becomes much more popular, which it is, when they come across BeVeg, which has done things properly, and it's looked ahead and it's worked out how to deal with this massive problem, how to have a vegan trademark that's trustworthy. That's not easy. That's taken quite a few unique skills and experience to come up with these ideas. And we're approaching it globally. And as I said, I keep repeating, I just hope someone like Walmart, McDonald's even, anybody that has a big brand, global brand importance, they're going to think this is getting more serious now. There's talk about vegan being legal claims. What can we do about it? Just go to BeVeg. They've already done it. Mm-hmm. And they've done it properly in a unique way.
Have you heard about the lawsuit that was brought in the Southern District of Florida against Burger King for cooking the Impossible Burger on the same grill as
doesn't surprise me.
The meat? And so a vegan brought a lawsuit. It's still pending. We don't know how they're going to come down on it for being offended because they were advertising 100% Whopper, 0% beef. But it was cooked on a grill with cross-contamination and spillover. So at first glance, I would say this seems very similar to the McDonald's litigation case, where there was the class action lawsuit for misleading advertising, saying that the fries were vegetarian in nature, when in reality they were cooked in lard. And that case paid out. But the difference is, on the face, it seems like it's just as egregious and bad in terms of details. And very similar. You're talking about two hamburger fast food chains that are misleading vegans and vegetarians. The difference is the McDonald's case was brought by a class of plaintiffs that were Hindu. So they are for religious protection. So this is a case of first impression in the courts right now in the United States. It's in the Southern District of Florida, on whether or not they will recognize a vegan's right to be offended.
Very interesting.
We're not a religious class. We're not recognized. Yeah. So it's going to take a creative court, and one that respects veganism, to come up with a decision that says, well, it's a moral belief system that is based on ethics that people practice religiously, and therefore this is misleading and this is fraud. But I don't know what's going to happen. And based on what happens, it could turn into an appeal. I do believe with every fiber of my being that will be what eventually happens with the law.
Yeah.
And that vegan that's bringing the lawsuit right now is on the right side of history. But you never know when history is in the making and when it's going to be made. And you never know what the courts are going to do, because in the end, you're dealing with human beings.
Yeah. That's very true. I think another aspect of BeVeg that we haven't spoken about is, we're going to have policies, we're going to have procedures, we're going to have training, and that's not going to stay the same. That has to naturally develop with changes, food scares, changes in legislation, court cases, which could have an impact on food labeling. We have to be aware of that. We need to detect and react to it and develop the policies and retrain people. So this isn't easy. So we've got automated training programs. We've got all these systems, people in place, and I think that's a big mistake and a big failure and weakness of other vegan standards. They've got very good at asking questions about ingredients. They know about 300 different ingredients that have all this animal origins. And that's it. They've stayed stationary. They don't want to recognize that the world is changing. So, one of the aspects of our systems is that we do recognize change. You detect it, and then you have to update your systems so that you're still in control. So you still reflect what's happening now, today. And that's part of the BeVeg design. Mm-hmm. And, who else is doing this? I sound frustrated, and I am frustrated because I've spoken to lots of vegan organizations before I met you, Carissa, and it's just two-dimensional. We're smug, we're making a bit of money, and I'm thinking, you know what? veganism around the world is either going to collapse or it's going to grow, and people like you, it's going to be another competitor. They're not going to care about ethics and sustainability and all those things that are associated, because let's face it, veganism is about ethics. That's the core of it.
Yes.
So if you're looking at it practically, if you're looking at it ethically, if you're constantly evolving and that's the way you're designed, who else is doing that? So you're going to get better and better. You're going to change as you go along. Veg may be different in a year's time because somebody in America or China or India, whatever, has had this big libel case, and we've changed some food labeling laws. So how are we going to detect that, and how are we going to update that and reflect that in the standard for when we do another certification audit a year later? So that's important, that we don't just stay stationary, that we're not just stuck in our old ways. It's a constantly evolving system. And that's one of the things I've liked about this project.
Right. And that's important because that's like the law as well, right? It's a living, breathing organism. And so is the vegan standard. And the standard, was penned with the right intentions, that the right global food safety initiative efforts behind it, with ISO accreditation backing it, with the right experts helping make it come to life. All of that is real. But the reality is that as we go into these factories, as we start applying this standard, as we start bringing transparency to the market that has never existed before, the standard is going to have to evolve and update and address the many gray areas that the word vegan faces, because there has been no legal definition and there has been no defined claim, and there's been no one holding a vegan word to any standard. It's like the Wild West. Everyone's claiming vegan and nobody knows what that means and by what standard. And it sounds great to do it. And hey, our sales increase like 100% when we do it, so we're going to claim vegan. But the reality is the standard is going to have to evolve as we go into these facilities and these retail chains and into these products, and we take a deep dive and we see the gray areas. And that's going to open up more areas for us to then address and republish based on what is practical, commercially viable, ethical, and looking out for the vegan. Like you said, there are other vegan labels that are now popping up that are from other certification bodies that really have no care or concern for veganism. They are just doing other food safety audits or other certifications, and they are being asked for vegan certification. So they are adding the vegan claim and certification to their existing certifications, but right now those are not accredited vegan standards for the specific vegan integrity, and those standards are not really drafted by a vegan lawyer or anyone that has a like you, the auditing food safety expert background. So I think the point is BVeg has your back.
It's interesting because I was always quite an unusual auditor. You're supposed to go in and identify failings and go home and have a nice cup of tea, being English. But the reality is and coffee, I go into a factory and I talk to everybody, the cleaner in the washroom with the steam coming out of his face. I get to know the supervisors. I get to know everything. And that's why I know how much I can trust that factory, by talking to the people on the shop floor. And I've had that approach for years and years because I care about people. I'm sensitive. I like to get them to come out their shell if they lack confidence. I won't criticize them. So I get to know much more about that factory than the average auditor. And of course, that experience and that knowledge that other auditors, frankly, wouldn't have had, I've put that into this BVeg standard. So if things are going to change and things are going to develop, that's what we want. For me, change is about making things much more trustworthy, much more legislated, being taken more seriously. I know some vegan companies that are very ethical and very well known. They dread change, because they don't know how to change. They don't know how to manage it. They haven't got that infrastructure or attitude, whereas, we want change. We want to develop. We don't want BVeg to be the same now. We want it to get even better. And
change is the only constant.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's the thing is, we keep talking about the ethics, but this technical vegan standard, it really reflects human beings people's natures. It looks at people, how, what kind of tricks can they make? How can we make them have a better food safety culture? You motivate them, you train them, you supervise them, you give them the right equipment, you guide them, you instruct them. We don't go into a factory and audit them and tell them where they're going wrong. We tell them where they're going wrong and how to do something about it, because we want them to be successful. That's the idea. We're not going in then giving them a grade. We want them to go onto the scheme to be successful, and all those consumers can benefit from that. We're working from the shop floor to the managing director, and we want it to be successful for vegan. And nobody does that.
Right. And I think that, you and I have seen the motivation of manufacturing facilities to want to consider other options so they can make the vegan claim, which is great, because that means that we are creating the demand in the supply chain for a more vegan world, which means less animal cruelty and less animal exploitation when a factory is willing to substitute an ingredient or a component or a practice in order to then be considered certified vegan by BeVeg. So I think it's really great to see that even though the claims aren't being taken seriously right now to what we would like to see, we are seeing that there's a serious interest in veganism and them wanting to figure out how they can make the claim with integrity, because they see that we're not a trend. We're not going away. We're a movement, and we're compounding.
No. Yeah. And I think a really important bit is, these major retailers, these major brands, the Corns, the Linda McCartneys, if they take this approach, money, that they will make money, they will protect their brands. We're not a charity. I don't want it to be a charity. I want it to be done professionally. I want it to be done commercially. I want people to make money out of this and still retain the ethics, because we have a solid system that understands the business, that understands the values and the standards and the ethics and the goals and everything else. But, people should be looking at this and thinking, even if you're not a vegan, this is actually something commercial here. And this organization called BeVeg, they're not wanting to be based in Florida, which, even though it's very beautiful, they want it to be global. They want it to be practical, and it is. This is exactly what we're doing. We're designing it in that approach. And it's extraordinary that I've met a lawyer from America, and I feel so isolated sometimes, even when I speak to the vegan world and you start talking technical. They don't need Prozac, they don't need sleeping tablets. They listen to me for 2 minutes, they're asleep in the middle of the day. They just want to know all the glamour, they want to know all the developments and the marketing. But if you get great marketing, a fantastic product, forget it. If you don't have technical, it's not the real world. I deal with the real world. And that's why a major retailer can look at this and think, right, okay, stop talking about ethics, not interested. I just want to protect my brand, because it's so important. It's so global, and you'll think, okay, that's what we're about. This is what we do. No problem. And we can say this in 2 years' time when there's all these major legal changes. Do you know why? Because we're still up to date, because that's our system. It is about keeping up to date and promoting things to get better and better and improving things. So it's very multidimensional. It's not static. It's a living, real system. Bit of a speech, that, wasn't it?
No, and that's a great, ending point too for the show, because we're coming up to the hour, and I think it comes down to, this is the law of divine compensation. You find your purpose and your passion, and you make it your profession. You find something that has integrity, you make it commercially viable, and that's the type of stuff we talk about on the Laws That Matter. And I'm excited to have a show about our breaking news here, because these are the laws that matter. You can have a passion, and you can apply your legal education or your technical auditing background or whatever it is you do in this world to find your purpose and to change the world and do something better.
Yep.
So on that note, Dave, any final words, any final thoughts?
No, just keep selling. Get Be Veg out. Let the world know about it. I think, your biggest problem is, are people heard about you? As soon as they know what you're doing, it's going to be successful. Just get out there and sell yourself. Brilliant. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, but Carissa, thanks very much. Bye-bye. Take care.